Truth Not Trends.
Oh, it's got to be bigger than that, man. We're not Truth Not Trends. We're Truth Not Trends.
Boom, baby!
This is Jesse Schmidt and Liam Bauer coming to you from the Truth Not Trends podcast, where we teach you how to maximize your strength as safely and efficiently as possible.
Changing the world one set at a time. Come over and see us at truthnottrends.com.
That's right. Podcast, blog, online training, you name it. We'll teach you how to get amazing results in the gym or at home in minimal amount of time. Head on over and subscribe to the Truth Not Trends podcast. A lot of good stuff.
Hello, gorgeous beasts. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast and enjoying it and staying with us and doing deep woo-woo stuff while at the same time getting your laugh on with Cassidy and myself. We want to let you know before the podcast today that I'm doing a 3-day healing retreat in Kinks, Colorado, known to many a spiritual practitioner as the womb of the world. We have room for 10 people to join us on this 3-day healing retreat, during which time I will be channeling all of the different light beings that desire to come through. So different races of light beings exist, like the Mintakans and the Pleiadians and the Syrians and the Lyrans. And they like to show up and contribute high vibrational healing energy. So what we'll do is November 6th through 8th, you'll join us in person here in Kinks, Colorado. We've got discounted hotel rooms for you, all set up. It'll be stunningly gorgeous and crazy high vibe. And this is for people who are looking for healing, integration, and or to know God and the divine more intimately. You don't have to be traumatized to be on a spiritual path, and being traumatized is kind of helpful when you're on a spiritual path. So join us November 6th to 8th, Kinks, Colorado. Email me if you're interested. klrubin@gmail.com. That's K as in kiss, L as in love, RUBIN @gmail.com.
Welcome to that spiritual, actual, factual answers to questions you're asking. You find them inside you, recite you, reciting the records. Akashic, we laughing, we drafting the passion through vary. It's time for that comedy, dramedy, all of the fanciest, catchiest acronyms. Listeners, listen, we traveling. Conscious is always unraveling. The reading you're having is mapping you back to your natural habitat. Abracadabra, it's magicless, fascinating. To top it off, the host, all the classiest. Now, what were you asking for? All of the answers? What are the answers?
I'm going to dive in and ask you stuff.
Yeah, hey. Hi, Katie.
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
We've had a messy start today, and that's okay.
Yep. Everything is what it is, and we are where we are.
How do you know Mollena, and what do you know about, what can you tell us about Mollena, our guest for today?
I am a huge fan of Mollena, and I have been for a long time. Here's my very short preface, and we'll get into more when we talk to her. I first met Mollena through theater. She was a founding member of Crowded Fire Theater Company, one of the founding members way, way back in the day. She did a lot more acting, stage acting back then. Meanwhile, concurrent with that, I also know that she is a very, I'd say, internationally known kinkster. She lectures and gives classes in different aspects of kink, having to do with domination and submission and other parts of that world. I'll let her say more clearly about that I think she would have no problem doing that, because she lives out loud. She lives on the internet. She lives very visibly. She writes what's going on in her day-to-day life with her husband, who is also like an internationally famous composer. And that's a whole story unto itself that happened more recently in her life.
Wow, fascinating.
Yeah, and she's been, when I used to have a storytelling show, she came on the storytelling show as often as we could get her. She lives in New York now, so she's not here that much, though she left she left New York right before a pandemic and hasn't been back, has been living in different places with her husband, including being trapped in Ethiopia for a while.
What?
When it happened, because that's when it happened.
Was she doing?
They were just traveling to Ethiopia, and then they had a place, and then they're like, "Oh, you can't leave, and you can't come back."
I wanted to make a joke that they were doing kink in Ethiopia, which feels like it wouldn't happen, but maybe.
No, betcha. Who knows? There's probably, there's a subculture in every city, at least.
I wonder, Ethiopia. I guess
we can ask her.
Yeah,
if there's a scene.
Yeah. Wow, fascinating. Okay.
And, she's been on a bunch of other storytelling shows and told a lot of interesting stories, including her journey towards sobriety and her life with, life as a Black woman in the kink world. That's a whole other story. And I think she has interesting views on spirituality. Well, we'll talk about all these things.
Because I'm actually curious to know, when we say the kink world, I feel like there's people in the world who have kinky sex, and then there's sort of people in the world having kinky sex kind of in public with each other.
Well, that's one aspect of kink, I'd say. Kink just being the sort of catch-all of, and also what do you mean by public, I suppose? Like in a dungeon that is public but also private, or in out on the street at Folsom Fair, right?
Well, I was thinking dungeon that's public and private.
Yeah, I think that's a little
So
more,
when we say
the
the kink world, I'm just trying to understand for our listeners, what you're referencing.
She was International Miss Leather about 10 years ago, which means she was recognized as sort of a very important figure in the leather world, which is a subset of the kink world.
Cool.
And I'm not going to represent this knowledge as well as obviously.
Okay, so we'll ask her. All right. Well, before we bring her on, I was thinking about you guys this week while I drove from Colorado I'm in Albuquerque, New Mexico now.
Hey.
It's your hometown.
Okay, just to be clear, it's an hour later there, right? Right now.
Yes.
For you.
Yes.
Because Arizona does things so dumb.
I know.
They're crazy. And we're going to do things different. We're not going to have Martin Luther King Day. We're going to ignore time zones. So that's why we got all confused this morning when I was conferring with our guest, who is in Arizona currently. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, anyway, so I'm in Albuquerque, and I am an hour ahead of all of you people now.
Thank God.
And something I was thinking about was something was sitting weird with me at the end of our time with Anurag last week. And I wanted to talk about it, and for the listeners and just for us, because there's two layers to it. One is sometimes when we get a person who coaches people on a podcast with a coach, it's a little weird, because it's a little I felt a little bit like Anurag kind of started coaching me when I wasn't asking for coaching. And I also felt a little bit like he sort of took over by sharing his coaching point of view about money and consciousness and what does it mean to be conscious with money. And I am someone who's easily swept up into I always feel like it takes great effort for me to be wait, with someone who has as much potency and strength as Anurag, I felt a little swept up into his current. And I think it's a lovely current, but having my own energy back after, I was able to sit there and realize what is it that is feeling weird to me here? And what it was, I feel like I want to say this for people listening, was that, and by the way, I love Anurag and I love his potency and strength. I just get swept up in it.
Yeah.
My point of view about spirituality and money is not that you've got to be able to say it's not about the money. I don't actually have that point of view. He was saying a lot over and over again about, if I'm saying it's not about the money, then I need it to actually not be about the money. So he keeps his money at zero every month so that he can really, really, really not be about the money. I have the point of view that I'm more of the let's make money doing what serves the people and using our gifts. As artists, let's make money. As healers, let's make money. I don't see it for me, making money doing what I do doesn't take away from the spiritual integrity of what I do. Because when I'm in the work with someone, my job is to be in integrity. You've already paid me by the time I'm in the work with you. I make people pay ahead of time. So by the time they're there, the money's been handled and I am committed to giving you the highest and best I can give you. So I don't I actually don't agree with the need to be coming from the perspective of it's not about the money. It's just about whatever, fill in the blank. That is not my perspective. So, but when he was on with us, I found myself being trying to almost match my point of view to his point of view and being yeah, me too. Except that after I was it's not really me too. I just hold it differently. Does that make sense?
I heard what he was saying slightly differently. I
Yeah.
feel like I didn't take as what he was saying as being in conflict with what you're saying. I felt like his was more personal, and he does have a bit of a coachy tone. So it sounds like you should think this too. But I was hearing it as I felt like I wanted to live in alignment with what I was claiming to believe.
Right, but what was he claiming to believe is what I'm discerning.
Right. And then, and I will also say, if according to your phrasing, which is like, it's not about the money, so I'm going to go down to zero every month. That's still about the money. Like you're still he's still attaching himself. I'm jumping back and forth across the line here on this, but in a sense, that sort of
Makes
connection to, I'm going to always do this. Still, you're living in relation to that concept.
Right. See, now that speaks to my point of view, which is the more, I guess I would call it like a kind of therapeutic or like integrative therapeutic perspective, which is there is no living on planet Earth without a relationship of some kind to money. Even if you're like in a hut in the jungles of Peru, at some point you got to buy more hut making materials or like trade for more hut making materials or build another hut. There's always a relationship to money.
Right.
So, but what I'm articulating is that I don't agree that in order to stay clean about why you're doing what you're doing, going down to zero. I hear what you're saying, that it was his personal thing, right?
Right. And he's still working with money. He's buying plane tickets. He's renting Airbnbs. There's no question that he is actually living with money.
Well, right. So I guess I'm just I wanted to just distinguish that, like, if what was being said was the way to be really clean about being in integrity with the work you're doing with people as a coach is for the money to not be a part of it, I don't agree, because for me, the money is intimately a part of it. In other words, I charge a fair amount of money because I'm worth a fair amount of money in terms of like the marketplace and capitalism and me having an apartment I can live in. And in terms of what I've seen that's out there in the world of the ilk of what I do, I'm like, yeah, based on all of that, I believe you should pay me this amount of money to give you this service.
Right.
So I'm of that mindset because I believe we have to, even when we're transcending everything and living in the realm of oneness and consciousness and integrity, you live in a 3D reality where you can't have a comfortable amount of air conditioning if you don't make a certain amount of money. And I'm not interested in being down at zero. And so I just felt like I didn't speak up in the moment and bring up that topic. And of course, now I'm bringing it up when he's not here, so we can't talk about it.
Sure.
But I'm saying, just for the listener, I didn't want to leave that episode hanging as if our podcast is standing by some kind of principle that I don't actually stand by. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. I understand that. And yeah, we don't ever want to represent a viewpoint that we don't respond to, at least just to make sure we're in alignment with what we believe, for sure.
That's all. And I think for him, it seems to be working. I think personally, it's an extreme way to go to get yourself to be clean with your intentions. But if that works for him, rock and roll. I just don't need to go that far to make that point for myself.
I have to say, I did not take what he was saying as a suggestion that I should do the same.
Yeah.
Or a judgment or a
point of view about
or a lecture. Right. It was more like, this is how I am living in alignment with. This is why. It was more in response to, why did you give all your money away? Oh, here's why. For me to live in alignment, this is the framework from which I walk down.
That makes total sense.
But he did go on about it enough that it takes a tone of lecture, and I don't mean in a like finger wagging way, but just takes a tone of like coaching. This is what you should do. Possibly.
Yeah, I just think he has a strong voice and a strong point of view, and it landed for me like I was being coached. And then but even worse than that, which has nothing to do with him, I found myself being like, oh, okay. Yes, I'll keep up with you. Yes, what you said. And then like, while I'm doing that, going like, what is happening? I don't like this. but it was me sort of like getting pulled into the tide of someone else's kind of whatever. So anyway.
Well, the other thing to look at, though, is how much, I mean, I do this all the time. I personalize the way someone else is choosing to live as somehow being a reflection on me. And I don't know if that's what you're doing, but I was like, oh, well, are you saying that I'm doing it wrong?
Well, I think I heard him as actively saying the only,
Okay.
I think that's what I heard. I don't think he actually meant that. You know, he didn't mean any harm. It wasn't bad.
I was inspired by him. I got to be honest. And now I'm taking a little bit more like, perspective, maybe loud male voice that I was responding to. But like so much of what he was saying, I was like, thank you. Good. And I can't live like that. It's fine. I'm not even stressing that.
Yeah.
But I'm like, okay, yeah, we should bring this person on because our time is a little shifty today.
In just a sec, we totally will. I just want to say, like, I like that you and I have different perspectives on what happened there. And I like that you heard it differently. I like that because, you know, this is the thing about communication all the time, right? Is that like, everything's coming through everybody's filters and like, I'm hearing one thing and you're hearing a different thing and he's a man and you're a man and I'm not a man and
right.
It's great. And so that's why I brought that back up, is just to be like, that really, I need to talk about feeling coached when I didn't ask to be coached. And by the way, I'm not talking even about on that topic. It was a different topic where I felt coached. And B, just like, let me be clear. I don't take that point of view. And C, rock and roll for him if he does, because it's working for, I don't give a fuck. I just don't want it to be implied that that's like the spiritual way to be with this stuff.
Well, as we've made clear, there's a billion spiritual ways.
Right.
Just choosing to live in alignment with a spiritual path is sort of the only like foundational, like, okay, in some way be in integrity with your spiritual truth. Like,
which is
whatever way that you can find.
And which is super unique to the individual, which is a perfect segue for our very unique individual guest today. Why don't we bring her on, Desmond? What do you say?
Hopefully she's ready to be brought up. I should message her, make sure that she's like, you know, ready to stand in front of a camera. Oh, I have a message from her.
Oh, there she is.
Oh, there she is. Sorry.
She's still connecting to audio.
Bringing you on. Eep, is she there?
Uh-oh.
In a sec. Here we go. Oh, we lost her. Wait, what happened? We just lost her video.
Okay, hello?
Oh, we have your audio.
Yay, what's up?
Hey, Mo.
How are you?
Good.
How are you?
I'm mostly fine. I'm just I'm incapacitated as far as my full functioning bandwidth because I've only been awake for like half an hour or so, and I'm not a first thing in my morning person. So if I sound a bit like derpy, that's why.
Understood. Well, thanks for being here with us today.
Absolutely.
So, you know, my name's Katie and I'm friends with Cassidy and this is the podcast. And Cassidy told me just a little bit about you. And I already, of course, like have a lot of, or a few questions. Could I launch into those?
Of course.
Well, okay, thanks so much. First of all, like, oh God, I could ask 900 questions. The first, before you came on, Cass was giving like a basic intro and I was like, okay, for our listeners who, you know, are all kinds of different people.
Sure.
When we say the phrase, the kink world, what are we referring to? Are we talking about people at home and they do kinky stuff with their partners? Or are we talking about a community of people who gather in dungeons? Are we talking about performance art? Like, what are we talking about? Or is it all of that?
It is all of that. The tendency has been in the past probably decade and a half of radical inclusivity when it comes to people considering themselves kinky. I've always been of that mindset because A, the more the merrier, and B, if you allow people to see themselves as part of a fringe community, it sort of brings the fringy people back from the edge a little bit. So for example, if I say to someone, hey, I'm a kinky person, the average non-kinky person would be like, well, I'm not kinky. I don't do that freaky SM shit. And then I say, well, you know, while you are in the throes of making love, have you ever, I don't know, held your partner's arms down and maybe bit him a little hard? And everyone's like, oh yeah, well, of course, like flip it, smacked it up, flipped it, rubbed it down at some point in your sexual career. Everyone's like, well, yes, of course. I'm like, congratulations, you are engaging in kinky sex, which basically just means anything that's not, procreative, direct to purpose, sex for reproductive purposes can be considered kinky because you're not doing it for any reason other than pleasure. So kink is such a spectrum that pretty much everyone can find their way into it. I like to say that everyone can golf. Not everyone's going to be Tiger Woods. Some people are going to go on the mini golf court and fucking do some putt-putt for half an hour on the weekend, while drinking a beer.
Uh-huh.
But you're still fucking playing golf, aren't you? Yes, you are.
Fan-fucking-tastic.
Everyone is not Tiger Woods. Like, I might be on the Tiger Woods end of the spectrum and literally fly around the world to talk to people about their fetishes. But that doesn't mean that someone who has this, dusty collar hidden in a locked box under their bed that they take out once a year so that they can get spanked is any less enjoying their kinky sex.
Great. Thank you so much. That is very thorough and clear, and I love it. And I'm now officially a member of the kink community. Now,
welcome.
Right now. Right.
Are you a putt-putt member or more of at least like a 9-hole? 9-hole is probably the worst phrase I could use right there. Maybe not.
No. But I think it's apropos.
So, okay. Now my next question would be, so when you say and Cass mentioned this too, flying around the world, talking to people about it, what are the contexts in which that happens? Like who's flying you where?
It varies wildly. In the U.S., generally, it's people who are part of a group or an organization or an event. Those are the people sort of in the middle of the spectrum. Like they're not on the PGA Tour, but they certainly would take a vacation to Scotland for golf. It's like those people. And so those folks will say, you know what? I just want an immersive weekend of doing kinky stuff, talking about kinky stuff. I want to have a huge play party. I want the energy of 300 people getting spanked all around me. And so there are these weekend events, for example, that happen all over the country. Back before the plague, I would say that on average, there were 3 to 5 events on any given weekend somewhere in the U.S. that were going down. And oftentimes they're very local. A Chicago event might not draw people from around the country, but it might draw presenters from around the country because folks locally want to hear some opinions from not just the local perverts. So they'll invite folks from other cities, other towns, wherever to come out and speak or lecture. There are also educational groups that exist. There are several that have been around since the 70s that still exist, like Society of Janus and the Eulenspiegel Society. And those are educational groups. And they will hold, meetings and events like monthly or biweekly or whatever. And sometimes those folks will invite people on a larger and more amazing scale in some other countries. For example, Sweden and the Netherlands, the government actually has educational programs for alternative sexuality. So, for example, the Swedish government flew me out for their Pride Month, because they wanted to have an adequate representation of people across various spectrums with intersectionalities. And there's not a lot of people of color in Sweden. So they're like, we need to bring in some people who aren't white Swedes because this is terrible because they're that woke. And so I got tapped to come out, and the arm of the Swedish government that deals with sex education paid for the trip. So it's all over the map. It's all over the map.
So when you travel, you're not traveling to like organize the event and bring all the spanky people together. You're traveling to speak at the event.
Yes. I am not an event producer. Okay. Because I'm not that masochistic.
Different kind of masochism.
Hello, it's fucking. My hat is off to those people, but it's a lot. So basically, like someone will say, "Hey, you talk about this thing. We'd like to hear you talk about it. Can you come to this place at the time?"
Wow.
And then I'll show up, do my little song and dance, and be like, "Da-da, here's my shtick," and then get the fuck out.
And how did you how did you become someone who had such a strong presence and voice in that community? Like, how did that build?
Short version, it started because I was actually a bondage bunny sort of demo model for someone that I was having a relationship with when I first got involved in the scene. And he was teaching classes at the time on this newfangled Japanese rope bondage thing that everyone was really curious about. In the intervening 25 years, it's become sort of passé to do Japanese rope bondage. But back in the day, people were like, ooh, ah. And he was forward thinking and made sure that his models were actually people of various sizes, because sizeism is a huge problem. And I was always complaining because I was like, you know what? I've had people say you're too fat to be suspended in ropes or whatever. And my thing is, that's bullshit. If you can move a piano with 5 straps, you can pick my ass up off the ground. It's just that you suck at physics and bondage. And so my dominant was like, yeah, well, let's get you up there. And I was like, fine, great. You know, it's not my favorite thing to do. I'm not so much of an exhibitionist, which is hilarious, but it's true. And so what started happening was people would say, hey, is it okay if we ask questions of your bondage model? And I would say, sure. And so people would start to ask, they're like, well, so I understand, you know, why you might want to tie someone up, but for you as the bottom, what do you get out of it? Why is this interesting for you? Isn't it kind of boring? And so then I just started talking about my experiences. And at the time, this was the early to mid 90s, there were almost no people who were teaching classes or lecturing who were bottoms or submissives or identified as consensual slaves.
Wow.
And so I was complaining about this. I was like, why aren't we learning from the bottoms? Like, I want to hear the experiences of other people. I want to know if what I'm feeling is okay or in or out of line or really crazy, and that context did not really exist. There were vanishingly few people doing that kind of work. And I had 2 friends of mine who were sort of mentors, one of whom was a submissive all the time, and the other was a switch, which meant that she operated both sides of the whip. And they were teaching a special retreat, which is basically like the 2 of them as their personalities, as established people in the community, were teaching a weekend-long sort of intensive class, you know, as one might do for massage or painting or pottery. You know, they had a submissive intensive, and they asked me if I would come and speak for 2 hours on the second day about my experience in submission. And I was like, okay, fine, sure. You know, I didn't have much experience, and so people were like, she hasn't even been here for like a year. What the fuck is she doing trying to teach people? And folks were like, well, have you heard her talk? And the reality is, as a performer, I have a certain skill set that enables me to make my my life experience into a story. And story, of course, is, in my opinion, if not the most powerful, definitely one of the most powerful ways to convey information.
Yeah, I would agree.
And if you can do so with some humor as well, you know, you really land it. And it's important when you're talking about freaky sex, because I can't just roll up and be like, hey, I'm a slave, da, 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 da. It's going to be off-putting. People are going to be confused. They're going to, you know, but if I roll up and I go, hey, so, you know, that beaver cleaver thing with the, you know, Donna Reed wife with the dress and twirling, I really love that. You know, I that's sort of my thing. Let me tell you the story about the time I, you know, bought a guy a cup of coffee and had an orgasm. Like, that's much more engaging to people. And I've discovered that the storytelling was the end. So as a professional storyteller, I was like, oh, this is easy. I can do this. And that's how it sort of got off the ground. And then, of course, the second part of it was I started talking about some super controversial shit that upset a lot of people. And therefore, you know, everyone immediately was like, oh, well, she's the girl talking about like race and kink and leather and BDSM and slavery. And she's fucked up because she's Black and wants to be a slave. And what's wrong with her? So then that became sort of like the one-way quick slide ticket right to the 9th circle of SM hell. And then that was sort of like the 1-2 punch. You know, I had some skills that were easily demonstratable, and then got hooked in on a topic that no one was talking about. And even to this day, there's a very small handful of folks who will speak on it coherently. So
wow.
Here we are.
That makes a ton of sense. Thank you for all of that. I feel personally like I got to ask a follow-up question about the subtopic. Would that be okay?
Of course.
So can you tell us kind of, I don't know, I'm sure it's complex and there's a lot to say on the topic, but what would be how you would respond if someone were to say, like, what do you get out of subbing? Like, what happens for you internally? What's hot about it?
Well, it's going to be different for everyone.
Yeah.
But the most relatable aspect of it I can share is that generally, aside from people who are on the spectrum of sociopathy, most people feel pretty good when they do something for someone else. It's a pretty basic thing. It's everything from multi-million-dollar philanthropy to giving someone $1, on the subway. You get a little boost. There's a little chemical boost. It's science. Go look it up. But doing things for people, there's all sorts of serotonins and hormones and oxytocin and all kinds of shit that gets released when you do things for other people. It's a feedback loop. It's a spiritual connection. It's service for a lot of people who are religious. Submission to God is part of their shtick. A lot of people want to look at submission as something that is weak. And I would say to you, well, look at everyone in the armed forces. That is a whole cadre, millions of submissives across the land. I would challenge you to walk up to a Marine and be like, yeah, look at you submitting. You're weak ass. They would probably take issue with that. And it would not be correct because what they're submitting to is something higher than themselves. And that idea of saying there is something larger than me that will take precedence beyond my needs, even just for a moment. And that connection with spirit, that connection with humanity can be very powerful. And so when you take that and you codify it into a relationship and you say, what our connection is about is my providing a service for you. And in return, I get those warm fuzzies, but like all the time,
Wow.
What's sort of great about my relationship is that I live in a constant state of knowing that everything that I do for my husband and owner is deeply appreciated and needed. And that makes me feel good, especially as someone who tends to be kind of a martyr and gives and gives and gives and gives and gives and gives and gives, because that's all I was modeled as a kid. Having a situation where that is regulated and protected and respected is almost like a harm reduction kind of a thing. So rather than me saying I'm going to be in a place where I just cough up my insides for this person who then just eats it all up, our agreements that are in place are, yes, you are in service to me, you do things for me, and in return for that, I will take care of your financial needs. B, you have medical insurance. C, you are able to function in a way that makes it easy for you to procure the things that make my life and therefore our lives amazing. And that's the core of my job.
Wow. God, I love that.
And so, one of the keys to this, in order to try to stave off potential abuse, because it's a minefield for that. My very first dominant had in place something that was referred to as the Prime Directive, which is, a little bit of a Star Trek geek moment, because Star Trek geeks are going to be like, what? You're not supposed to interfere in pre-warp culture, but that's not what ours is. Our Prime Directive basically states that the primary responsibility of the submissive of the slave is to take care of the property. Sidebar, the property is you, right? At all times, up to and including protecting the property from the owner themselves.
Okay.
So what this breaks down to is my first job is to make sure I'm doing well. Because if I'm not doing well, I cannot serve effectively.
Right.
And if I have a problem or an issue, it is my first job to say something, not to suck it up, not to tuck it away, not to bury it, as so many people do in so many relationships.
That's right.
And so what we strive for is that transparency, because the transparency is really the only thing that can help you stave off a potentially emotionally or physically abusive relationship. And so that's what we strive for,
That makes total sense. What is the difference then, or let me frame it like this. What's the value for you in codifying this rather than, you could say, for example, like, I don't know, I know some relationships in my life of people I know, couples I know, where it's essentially what you guys are, what you and your husband are, but it's not been labeled as such or codified as a master slave dynamic, but they kind of roll that way. What does that extra layer of language and codification do for the both of you?
Well, initially there's a sexualization of it that's happening, right? You have a fetishization. You're saying, you know what,
Right.
this is not just something that is part of our lives. It's something that's actually erotic, and to be able to eroticize something like doing something for someone makes life kind of awesome. Like if I can make a meal for Georg and then just stand there basking in him enjoying it, and that kind of gets me fluttering around the edges a little bit, like that might be different from someone saying, I did a good job. I'm like, yeah, I did a good job.
Okay.
And
I
so
love it.
you're putting that energy into a different container, right?
I see.
And so what we've done is that we've constructed this container of ownership, because that is something that we fetishize. The idea, the concept of saying I belong to someone is a turn on. Like it's just a, you could dig deeper and find out why, but we're just talking about like why it works. What the difference is, it's an awareness and it's an acknowledgement. And I would say the difference between that also means that you are doing it with intention, and intentionality is super duper important.
Right. That makes sense. So did you grow up, if I may, in a household that was like super open with sexuality and everything was supported?
No. Not for a fucking second. I actually got punished for reading The Joy of Sex at my cousin's house. I started reading when I was like 3. And so like books, I just was like putting my face inside them all the time. And I was maybe like 4 or 5 at our cousin's like barbecue, the 4th of July barbecue. And she had like all these books in the master bedroom. And I went there to use the bathroom and I was like, what is this? And I was like, whoa, it's amazing. So I'm like sitting like tucked behind her bed in the room, like reading this book. And my cousin's like, oh, yeah, I have to tell your mom that you read this, because really, she's like, I don't have a problem with it, but your mom. So my mom, of course, is like, she's 2 years, remember? So my reaction to that is, if there's something adults don't want me to have, it's got to be awesome.
Right.
So I did not have that experience. Basically, I was told, wait until you're married to have sex. And then when it was obvious that was not in the game plan, there was a lot of guilt and a lot of things that were not handled as well as they could have been. Fortunately, I had the temerity to find this information on my own as best as I could. I had plenty of friends who had a lot of really interesting books, because their parents were cool and groovy 70s parents. So I sort of picked a lot of it up that way. But no, I was not coming from that environment at all.
Okay. Now this leads to my most complex question, which I'm going to see how well I can do here framing this question the way I mean it, which is, okay, so a little bit of context. I had a dom friend, a female dominatrix friend who I got to really ask a lot of questions of at a certain point. She was just like awesome and super open. And if you met her, she had this really soft-hearted quality. Like I would meet her and be like, she's a kitten, meow. She is not she's like cuddling up by a fire with a white blanket and wearing pink roses. She's not like fucking dominating dudes all day, but so it was very confusing for me at first. And I was like, can you help me understand what's happening? Anyway, and so I learned a lot from her, and it was really interesting. And one of the conversations we got into that, I imagine that the response to this question that I'll pose, excuse me, it would be different for every person I would ask, probably.
Sure.
So in my world, right, I'm a working spiritual healer, right? People come to me with like stuff they want to clear out of their system or integrate into their system or own or be relieved of or transmute or whatever. Now, some people, I mean, I've had people come and they have so much shame around a sexual thing. Like personally, I'm like, do whatever you want. I don't give a fuck what people do. Like, but if people come and they have shame around it, I go for the shame. I go into the shame and we energetically try to clear the shame. And a lot of times what I notice that happens is when you clear the shame, like if you fully were to relieve shame from a person who has a kink based in response to their own shame, or a kink that creates shame. Shame is complicated, right? It shows up in all these weird places for different people for different reasons. What I'm getting at is that sometimes when you clear the shame or the trauma, right, that put the whole thing in place, or the daddy issue that created the whatever.
Right.
Suddenly the kink goes away. Like the need to be fill in the blank just kind of isn't there anymore because you don't have the underlying whatever that created it. Now, let me just very clearly state, I don't have a point of view about that. Like it should go away because it's bad and wrong at all. It's just that I have noticed over time that does occur. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I would say definitely for some people, some of what fetish is about that shame or that embarrassment or that shyness or that reluctance, and it is integral to it, right? If you are a humiliation fetishist, you need that shame. Like you gotta have it, because without that, the humiliation fetish is nothing. What is fascinating to me is that I have discovered that every time you think you have gotten over a thing that's shameful, there's something else. Like if you are dedicated to feeling a particular emotion like shame or embarrassment, there's a way to find that if that's what you need. So for example, if you are ashamed just in general because you're a kinky person and you think that makes you a bad person, and you get over that aspect of it and you're like, oh great, I'm now I don't have any shame. But it might be that you dig a little deeper and you discover, actually, what I really love is licking the webbing between people's toes.
Right.
That's actually my thing. And so now you have a whole new thing to get over because, even other kinky people are going to be like, really? Toe webbing? Huh, okay. I guess. So there's, in my opinion, there's always something more to find if what the issue is that you have lost the charge of shame around it. And for a lot of people, that's really important. But believe me, there's always something else. There's never going to not.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I get that. That makes 100%. But what let me see if I can frame what I'm asking. It's something like some people would come at, like, could you frame you could say, in theory, that maybe I don't actually know what you would say, but I can hear certain people's voices in my head being like, how much of kink is just a thing that happens for, and by the way, hold on a second. Let me back up. I am a kinky motherfucker. Okay. I am weird. I like to bone all kinds of ways and do all kinds of crazy shit. So let's not, and I'm like as woo-woo spiritual as they come. So it's all in one package and I'm not confused. Now, that I feel like let's put that on the table. It's out there. I like a lot of nipple play. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Awesome.
Noted.
I'm not super. What'd you say?
Nothing. I said noted as though that were relevant to me. It is not.
I get it. It's a fun joke. Okay. So, but the question I'm trying to come at delicately, I'm just going to go ahead and say it just for the sake of conversation.
We don't have to be delicate. I don't think that matters.
Thank you. Is like, could we, like, if I were to dig deeply, is there a world in which we could buy the idea that me liking a good fucking tooth on the nipple, strong style, comes from something that were just in a theoretical way, that were we to heal or integrate or clear that something, I would no longer actually need that? Or are we coming from the perspective of, listen, things just are what they are, and you like to get your nipples bitten?
I think both of those things are true. And what I will say is that everyone I know, and myself included, evolves in their kink. So the idea that there's a thing that you really love that then loses its charge happens for everyone. Like that's that's a life thing, like when I first got involved in the scene, I was like, I need to do like super hardcore submission, like the tough stuff and kneeling on the floor for 3 hours straight and orgasm denial and all this other stuff. And within 5 years, I was like, fuck this. No, thank you. No, no, I'm fucking done. I'm done. But the thing is that there's always something else to do. And so it wasn't necessarily about shame. It was about growth. And I think that we outgrow or ingrow various kinks, fetishes, relationships. All those things are an ebb and a flow. So I think that definitely does happen. I think it happens. I know it happens for different reasons. And it's not healthy or unhealthy insofar as long as it's something that is still fulfilling for you. It can be disappointing if there's a thing like if you came in and you were like a huge fan of fire play and all you wanted all the time was people running little like hot torches up and down your ass. And then like 2 years later, you're like, it's lost its spark, pun intended. There's a shit ton of other stuff for you to do. So you can still get that need fulfilled of feeling that you're living on an edge or taking a risk or doing something new and exciting because you're never going to run out of new and exciting things. But I think that it is natural for us to move through relationships of all sorts, relationships with our kink, relationships with our sexuality, relationships with other people. And so my relationship to, for example, hard edge, strict formal submission is different than it was, 25 years ago. I have no interest in that now. None. Like, I'm just like, no, go fuck yourself. Like, I'm not going to have a DS relationship where it's all about restrictions. Leave me to do my fucking job. Thank you.
Can I ask a question about that?
I would never have said that 20 years ago.
Do you think, though, that might be, I don't know. Do you feel for yourself that some of that is like transformation of energy, whereas like you either had something, you completed something, or is it that you got just simply get bored of it and need a different edge? Or is it actually, I finally either healed or addressed or transformed the energy that was driving that, and and now there are other things to address?
All of those have happened. With something as core as like submission and how I do it, that's definitely a healing and a growth thing. I'm going to go on the controversial edge and say that people who subscribe to a very hard edge of submission where, for example, the submissive's needs genuinely are not as important as the dominant's needs, where submission is really about 100% fulfillment just from doing the act of submitting, not from emotional support, not from emotional feedback, certainly not from love because you are not worthy of love because you're a slave. Like that idea has a sort of a freaky romance in that sort of objectification line, right? It might be super hot to be used like that for an evening, but living in that headspace, I was like, this is actually really dangerous and bad. And I'm not going to do that because it's unhealthy for me. And so that was a growth thing because I had to go through that process to realize it wasn't healthy. Someone could say it all day and I'd be like, yeah, but it's still so sexy. I really want to do it. So in that way, that was definitely a growth thing. For other stuff, single tail whips or whatever, I'm like, it was fine. I don't really need it. And over the years, what I discovered is that for me, I'm less about the toys and the actions and the functionality than I am about the feeling, the emotional connection and the spiritual aspect of it. So that's more important. So I discovered over the years, people would say like, oh, what are you into? And I'm like, this is going to sound sort of cheesy, but I'm really into seeing you enjoy yourself. If I'm bottoming to you, I just want to see that gleam in your eye. What puts that gleam in your eye? Well, spanking. Great. Let's do that. Like I didn't have necessarily a deep, strong attachment to any particular act. I realized I had a very strong attachment to the emotional connection, and that enabled me to try a lot of really awesome stuff. There were lots of fetishes that I was curious about that I really wanted to try that I didn't. You want to talk about shame? I was really curious about human animal role play. I was like, what is that? Why are people pretending to be dogs and horses? This is weird. Fucking weirdos. And then it took me, I'm not shitting you, a decade of talking myself into it to even try it because I was like, oh, I might be a freak. I might be a pervert, but these people dressing up like ponies, they're the real weirdos.
There's still a level of judgment somewhere.
Exactly. There's always that. And then by the time I finally was like, fuck it, I just want to try it out. I need to know why people do this. And if in order for me to know, I need to do it. So, I put on a pair of ears. I'm like, great. Today, now I'm a horse. Here I am being a horse.
I've seen her horse outfit. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, so I eventually grew into that. But what I realized was I was like, holy shit, I don't have to do anything. I'm a hyperactive, hyper aware giver, performer person, and I have been since plopping out of the fucking womb. I've always felt like I had to do something to earn my place in the room. And you put on these ears and you're like, hello, I'm now a pony. And you have 20 people gathered around you, petting you, telling you how pretty you are because you're standing there. Wow. And it was revelatory for me. I was like, holy shit, I'm amazing just standing here. Pet me, feed me snacks. Not that snack, this other snack. I reject your snack. I am a fussy pony. I need to be petted. and trotted around and told how pretty I am. And that was, I mean, for someone with self-esteem issues, from a recovering alcoholic who can't get her life together, just to have people say, look how pretty you are for hours. I was like, okay, I get it.
Right. Yeah, I get it. Now, coming from the addiction angle, that was where I was going to go next. You know how in recovery, the angle is, sort of like the notion of if you're pursuing some intense activity, AKA alcohol and drug abuse or too much sugar or whatever it is, right? Heroin, whatever, sex with strangers on a treadmill, whatever. that inherent in that pursuit of that sort of high adrenaline thing is a kind of avoidant pattern that look, we don't pursue, high speed car chases and alcohol abuse because we just love alcohol. We do it because we're looking to get away from something.
Right.
So does it ever, do you ever apply the addiction model to the kink stuff you're into and say, wow, what am I trying to get away from with this like overstimulation of whatever, with dressing like a pony? Does that framing even apply or not?
I do not believe it does. And I will say that because my belief is that what you are actually doing is having to take radical responsibility for your desires if you are making them happen. So you can't be running from them. You are running into them and putting yourself like ass and elbow deep into that sticky, messy place. So it's the opposite of avoidant. Now, can it be used to avoid? Of course, everything can. And so the thing is that when I first got sober, I realized rather quickly that there was a half of my life I had to sort of dance around in a meeting because people wanted to talk about that being a problem. I actually started a kink-centric recovery group specifically for that reason, because I was tired of being in meetings and having to be like, oh, this really great thing happened, but I can't talk about this epiphany I had during a spanking because they're going to be like, you need another meeting for that. But the thing is that like radical sex means radical responsibility. And in my mind, radical responsibility is the opposite of running away from something. I'm saying, here's a desire that I have. It's difficult. It's weird, but I'm going to do what it takes to try to do this with some sort of emotional safety and support, which is why we have classes and shit, so that we can try to do this in a way that's not damaging, that's actually uplifting.
That's great.
And so I would not say that it is necessarily that. Can it be? Yes, because we are capable of fucking anything up.
Of course. I got to tell you a quick story. One time I was in recovery for a long time myself. I did 15 years of sobriety and I was like a circuit speaker and the whole thing. And one time I went to a meeting in the Mission at some dungeon, a sex dungeon.
My God, you went to my meeting. You went to Safe Word.
Okay, I did not know what I was walking into. And I walk in and we go downstairs-ish, I think. And there was, because like I did not go there to see kink that day. But I'm like, I'm not a super vanilla person. So I get in there and I'm like, I'm looking around and I'm going, something's different in this room. Pretty quickly into the meeting, two leather-bound, collared dudes get on all fours and like, how they pass around a hat for money, like a church. Two leather-clad dudes with like ass chaps, like ass out, leather strap up the crack, on all fours, going around with the 7th tradition on their back.
Yay!
And then people started throwing the change at them, like
so they had to pick it up off the floor,
No, like pegging money, like coins, pegging the person, like, and I was like, that's going to get hurt. And the guy was happy as a clam.
Of course he was. He's like, I'm sure they have to sign up weeks in advance.
Oh my God.
Who gets to do it this week?
I was like, oh my God, where am I? And my first reaction was like, I got to get the fuck out of here. And my second reaction was, I'm not going anywhere. What is this
awesome
about? So you have been to that meeting?
I started that meeting. I started that meeting back in at the end of 2007 when I first got sober.
Okay.
Because I was like, I'm tired of this. Why isn't there a kink meeting? And one of my sort of mentors in the scene, who has been sober for decades at that point, said, "Oh, there used to be a leather meeting called Sobriety and Miracles. Get it? Sobriety and Miracles.
S and M.
And so, but shockingly, a 12-step group for perverts fell apart because of drama and infighting. I know that seems like, how could that possibly happen?
What a stunning surprise.
But so then I was like, well, I want to have that. And then my friend said, well, then you should start it. That should be your service to get that meeting started again. And so I did.
Rock and roll, rock on. So, do you know the premise of this podcast, that we open our guests Akashic Records and get spiritual guidance for them?
Yeah, I don't know a lot of what that means, but I'm stoked because I can always use some guidance and healing.
When I asked if she'd be on the program, she said, I only know the Akashic Records from Anne Rice novels. So I had to look that up.
I was trying to make an Akasha the vampire queen joke.
No, but they talk about them. They actually do talk about the Akashic Records. I looked it up.
Yeah.
No,
and
I know.
I'm sure it's badly represented.
I just think it's funny. That's like a fun way to meet the Akashic Records, is in that whatever, man. Whatever.
In the middle of the wank fodder, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So basically the way I frame it, Mollena, is that the Akashic Records are just like a high vibrational frequency realm of consciousness, or a place in God's world that is quite close to the epicenter of the highest vibrational light that there is. Mm-hmm. So I just open your records, and then I'm sitting in alignment with your soul and its alignment to source. And from there, everything that's happened for you, or is happening, or is coming around the corner that's written, we can, I can see it, and anything that desires healing, light can come through to heal it. So you can ask questions, and sometimes the answer to a question might be an energy that comes, and sometimes the answer to the question might be words, or another question back to you, whatever. So right. Basically, if you're up for it, I'll just take what we would do is I'd take your full legal name, which I think is Mollena Lee Williams Haas.
That is correct.
Okay. And then we do like a really brief guided meditation-y type thing, unless the record keepers tell me not to, in which case we'll just start in with the prayer. I'll say the Akashic Records prayer with your name in it a couple times, the one that I'm currently using. And then I'll let you know that the records are open, and then you can just ask anything at all about anything.
Awesome.
Okay.
You in?
I'm in. I'm here for it.
All right. Well, this is so fun. I love the,
Yay!
And this brings, like, just to put a direct kind of like fine point on this point, it's like let me put it like this. I, for a long time, was healing in my healing process myself, which turned me into a healer. I didn't set out to become a healer. I just did a lot of spiritual, high vibe, energetic healing because it was what worked for me to get through the trauma I was carrying. Right. And one of my trauma healers, who is like a super spiritual dude, was helping me heal all my sexual abuse trauma. I had like really fucked up sexual abuse when I was an infant, and then when I was 3, and then when I was 6. And it was bad, and so bad that like it affected my brainstem and my memory and just everything. Really dark, heavy stuff had to be like really transmuted in quite a deep way for over years and years of very concerted effort. Right.
Yeah.
So to me, there were a lot of years where messing around. Well, let me put it like this. There was a day that my like high vibe, white light, Archangel Michael following healer guy said this sentence to me. Like, he was someone who felt really safe to me because he was so white light, right?
Yeah.
And he could transmit light like nobody else. And he was just so gifted at it. And one day he said to me, like, Katie, the sex you have is part of your spiritual development and it grows you forward on the spiritual path. And I was like, what? Because at the time I had so much sex related trauma to heal that I couldn't understand. I couldn't really buy in to that idea.
Right.
Now, years later, having gotten through the trauma and the shame and the fear and all the whatever around the traumatic incidents that had occurred, my whole sex life started to change and I started to see what he meant. Like I'd get with some dude and like have a tantric experience that rocketed my spiritual journey forward. And it would be with like somebody I saw 3 times.
Yeah.
Or the next thing that happened was like one time I had a Kundalini awakening with a guy I saw once. And he did not know what the fuck was happening. I was like seeing God through the third eye of my vagina, like in the form of like a white snake that was coiling up my crown. And he's just like grunting and fucking a lady. He has no idea. Yeah. So like I've come full circle, pun intended, to where I am so clear today about the spiritual nature of the sexual communion process that one goes through with another human mammal. It's so clear to me how intimately relate. Like, I mean, we all have heard the idea that the divine feminine is like birthing through her desire all that is. Everything that exists before us came from the orgasm, if you will, of creation itself, and creation itself just like blisses things into being, which is, what do we think orgasm is? It's that, it's the thing that brings life to the planet. So anyway, to me, it's just like, I'm so grateful to have gotten through that trauma stuff.
That's amazing.
I would never have gotten to understand. I mean, I'm a lucky person because in my mind, I always had like a bit of an awakened mind that was like, I see that once I get through this trauma around sex, I'm going to see the connection between sex and God. Like I knew there was going to be one, but a lot of people don't know that. And so they just stay forever stuck in their sexual trauma because how would they know? Why would they know? And then they could never connect sex to God because sex was either a painful, torturous thing in the past, or the Bible says blah, 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 or their family says blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so I love it. I'm grateful to get to be experiencing that at this stage.
That is pretty fucking amazing. Yeah.
What a gift, Okay. Anyway, that's just more context for diving into the records here. So yeah, off we go. If you're ready, I'll dive. All right. So my records are open and have been since before we got on. So I'm just going to check in with my record keepers. Like, do we need to ground for Mollena? No. Do we need to pull her into her body? No. Is it in her highest good? We do either. No. Shall we start with the prayer? Okay. So we're going to dive right in, Mollena. This is happening more and more with me lately. People are just kind of ready to go. So we'll just take a couple deep breaths into the pelvic floor. Yeah, becoming aware of the heart center, its connection to the second chakra, the pleasure center, and its connection to the pelvic floor. Noticing the throat chakra, the heart chakra, the third eye, the crown, the alignment of every chakra to every other chakra, breathing into the physical form, owning and acknowledging the presence of the divine within the physical form. We now acknowledge that we as physical beings live in no separation from the divine light. The molecules that make up our bodies are the molecules that make up consciousness itself. All is one. Namaste. And so we do acknowledge the forces of light, asking for guidance, direction, and courage to know the truth as it is revealed for our highest good and the highest good of everyone connected to us. Holy Spirit of God, divine white light, protect me from all forms of self-centeredness. Please direct my attention to the work at hand. Help me to know Mollena Lee Williams Haas in the light of the Akashic Records, to see Mollena Lee Williams Haas through the eyes of the Lords of the Records, and enable me to share the wisdom and compassion that the masters, teachers, and loved ones of Mollena Lee Williams Haas have for Mollena Lee Williams Haas. And I'm going to go quiet for just a moment here. Okay, so the records for Mollena Lee Williams Haas are now open. And so we're just going to set the intention here that we be as deeply and as brightly and as completely aligned with and dropped into the center of Mollena's Akashic Records now as we can be, for the sake of hearing the highest guidance for her greatest good and for bringing through any divine light that desires to come through today. I ask that you clear anything and everything out of any of us that needs clearing, myself, Mollena, Cassidy, Desmond, and anyone listening, that would be in the way of our receiving of the highest vibrational frequencies of light and guidance that she requires or desires today. I mean, okay. And so are we ready? Yes. All right. So where would you like to begin, Mollena? What questions are on your mind?
I'm working on I'm starting to work on a project, on a writing project, and I'm excited about it, but I'm also experiencing a lot of terror of failing, of just not being able to pull an entire opera out of my ass, and it's really tripping me up. That's the big frontal lobe eating machine right now.
Yeah. Okay. So let me see if I get what you're saying. You've been asked to write an opera.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And you're having fear and anxiety about your ability to do so?
Yes.
Okay. And what is the topic of it, if you don't mind?
Yeah, it is an adaptation of 3 Hans Christian Andersen fairy tales that have bothered me my entire life. And so basically I'm rewriting them with more radical, awesome, and just endings than we have in the original.
Okay, that's great. Because, it's so cool how this works. So the first thing I heard, when we drop into the records here, well, there's 2 things. The first thing I felt when we dropped into your records is how open your second chakra is. No surprise, I guess. Mm-hmm. And how clean it is. Like it's getting worked out enough. It's just very open and pure and clean and connected to you. And there's not a lot of stuff in the way. Mm-hmm. So as you probably know, that's creativity and sexuality and sensuality. Yeah. Right. So, and the unahapili, right, as the Hawaiians say, which is just that inner child or the vulnerable young one within. So you have such great access to that yourself. The second thing is they said, it's like all you have to do, here's the good news with this opera. This is going to be like layer 1. You need to tell your own stories. Like you can stop thinking of this as I have to invent anything. All you need to do is drop into your second chakra, which is so open and so connected and so knows what's true for itself, and tell some of your own fucking stories and write them down. Word. And in fact, they're saying, okay, tell 3 separate stories that are related. One story related to the first Hans Christian Andersen story, a different story related to the second one, and a third story related to the third one. Tell your own stories, whether you do it by, they're showing me you like pacing around your room, speaking into a recording device. Like you could tell it audibly, vocally, verbally, right? Whether you do it that way and then transcribe it or not, it's fine either way. But they're like, you need to talk this out loud. And so as you're telling, you look at the first story and you're like, this is about a little boy who's in a gingerbread house or whatever. You go, but in my life, it was like this. Yeah. And then, and you tell that story orally out loud. And as you're telling it out loud, you're going to gain insights into how it relates to the Hans Christian Andersen story. And you're going to talk it out as you go. And that's going to give you information. So it's kind of like your first draft is going to happen that way. If you want, and if that works for you, because they're like, that's the easiest way to start.
Yeah. And it's funny because I always feel like that's sort of lazy, which is hilarious. And I'm like, no, that's just, I'm like, no, it's not though.
No, it's really not. It's really not, because look, when we're looking at what is the purpose of this opera? The purpose of the opera is to retell the stories in a way that's like not so fucked up.
Yeah.
So what experience do you have? I mean, all you have is your own life experience to know your version of what something less fucked up would be. So as you're telling your own personal life story, like they're talking about like, you know how you tell a story from your own life and pretty much the purpose of the story ends up being, and so that's how I learned this piece of wisdom about being alive. Right. That's not cheap or lazy. That's like your fucking life experience led you to deep awareness of deep wisdom, which comes from the well of the divine feminine. So you're dropping into the well of truth itself, the great truth, capital T, by telling stories from your life. Because you're not just telling a story, you're getting to the wisdom you gleaned from the story. And the wisdom you gleaned ends up being either, in this case, with regard to these Hans Christian Andersen stories, either more wise than what the fuck the stories said, or a different version of wisdom, or an addition to the wisdom that was presented. Either way, you're bringing wisdom to the table. So how is that cheap?
It's not.
Yeah. Also, knowing you, they say, it's like when you drop into that second chakra, Mollena, and you start telling truth, your thing is truth. Okay. Your doorway is truth. And you stand in this world as a pillar for people of, it's okay to have a fucking self. It's okay to have a lower self and a mid self and a higher self. It's okay to say fuck, and it's okay to want to be a pretty pony. It's okay. And by being a pillar for that, for people to be allowed to be who they are, you give people permission to transmute, transcend, heal, elevate, or not. And so when you go to tell a true story from your true life, your truth is wide open and awake in that second chakra for you. That's your gift. That's your whole thing. So it's the opposite of cheap, and it's the opposite of lazy. It's like, how do I tell truth? Well, I'm going to tell the truth about my life. Now, remember, they're giving you this as draft 1. This is a door. This is like a way in. 3 stories from Mollena's life, 1 related to each of the Hans stories, and then see where that takes you.
Yeah, that is really, really amazing. Awesome. And helpful.
Good. And they're also saying, no, in the same way, beloved, that you go like, hey, if it's sexy and it turns you on, there's no shame in it. Same with your story writing. They're like, go to the stories and the places in the stories that are sexy and turn you on. And it doesn't have to be a sexy story, but you know how like right? Certain stories from life, like you're like, yeah, and then I fucking bought a franchise of a Subway subs and I was a badass. Right? That's like a sexy story for some people. Or like I bought a pretty kitty cat and put it in a box on a windowsill and it was like purring. That's a sexy story to some people, whatever. Like they're saying, follow the juice in the same way that you follow the juice, kink wise, follow the juice. Right?
Oh, good.
Yeah. And let go of all notions that there's some right way that this has to go, or that there's some correct way to do this, or that the people who have written operas before you know something you don't know.
Yeah, they sure don't.
No, they really fucking don't.
They sure fucking don't.
Now,
why I wound up in this spot.
Exactly. Now, are you writing music as well?
No, my husband is he's composing the music.
Perfect. Now that's great, because here's what's going to happen as you start telling these stories, right? Where you're following the sexy and you're following the truth and you're just telling the raw dog truth. You're going to notice moments where you're like, ooh, we could pause here for a song.
Yeah.
And then you're just going to make a note. Enter song about skipping down the road here. And then we'll put a little asterisk and then keep going. And then you'll notice another place like, ooh, song about spanking right here or whatever. Oh my God. Okay. What else?
I'm so brought back. I'm like, wait a second. Okay, hold on.
Good.
I will say interestingly, I was like, okay, let's ask relationship stuff. And it's funny because my relationship with Georg is really kind of really great.
Yeah.
We have exactly one sort of point of separation, I guess, or a gap, which for an entire relationship, I think is kind of amazing. Like just like everything else falls into alignment. Our politics, our eating habits, our living. We were basically quarantined together as a lifestyle before this even went down.
Yeah.
But it's a twofold issue. The first fold issue is that he didn't come into this free way of living until he was 60. So he had an entire lifetime, everything being cramped and locked away and shameful and problematic. And so then he met me and he's like, great, all the sexy stuff I've ever wanted to do is going to happen right now.
Uh-huh.
Meanwhile, I'm sort of on the other curve, like winding down.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I've done all this stuff. I just like to curl up at home with my owner and do the thing. And so we've spent the past 6 years trying to sort of reconcile that gap of him really wanting to do all these amazing, awesome things. And my going, it's not, those aren't really in line with where I am right now, but let me set up a lifestyle so that you can explore those things. So if we go to an event, you can go and meet a nice, human being and spank them and have all this fun. But our libidos are at different places. And so, I'm like, the best analogy I can make is that it's like in terms of our emotional, sexual, spiritual sex needs right now, I'm sort of in camel mode where like I can stick my snout into the well, drink like a motherfucker, and I'm like, I'm done. Meanwhile, he's like a hummingbird, like, I need another sip. I need another sip. I need it right now. Why aren't we fucking? And I'm like, right. I'm old and tired is why.
Okay.
And some of it's physiological, right? You know, and some of it is just being in a different place. And it's the one, which sounds crazy, but it's like the thing. It's the thing that like, twice a year we have to sit and do like shit tons of processing around, and it gets me up in my feelings because I feel like it's tapping into my inadequacy. Like if I were, how can you be who you are and be a sex educator and like just not want to have sex all the time and or whatever else. So I struggle a bit with how to reconcile that, what to do, how to be okay. And there's a big difference between the reality of what I know logically to be true in that it's okay. It's just my body, it's just my life. It's where I am now. That can change. It's very fluid. And the part of me that is emotionally abusive around me not being perfect in every way.
Right. Okay, let me ask you a couple questions here. First of all, when he goes and gets his needs met with other people, are you okay with it for real?
Yes, I genuinely really, really am, because I am a fierce, ferocious beast when it comes to who he engages with. So I make sure that these are folks who are, feeling clear and feeling good and safe and connected. And so I actually wish that he were more comfortable doing more stuff with other people, but his desire really is that he wants us to do it together. It's like that's his thing, is that it's us. It's not necessarily just a thing. It's that he wants a thing with me. And having to reconcile, I'm like, you know what? I'm just not an orgy person. I'm not a group sex person. It's not my thing.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying I don't want you to do it. I'm saying like, if I do it, it's not going to be energetically what you want.
Yeah. Interesting. I'm sitting here listening to you and I'm listening to the record keepers and I'm just like, is there anything they need to do differently? And it's like, no, because
I didn't think so.
Yeah. Because you're already just processing when you need to process, and he's getting to do what he wants to do. And it sounds like you have strong boundaries of self-care.
Yeah.
And so he may be a little fucking disappointed from time to time, in which case you can say, go ahead and have an orgy with the neighbors. I'm busy tonight.
And it's so funny because it's like I have to remind him, I'm like, you understand that oftentimes when people have desires that don't meet with their partner's desires, it's just off the table. And that's actually healthy and fine. That's a healthy compromise, but not everyone gets to say, okay, I can do this, but maybe in this modified way that's also exciting and fun. But I feel, part of me feels like I am handling it as responsibly and in as healthy a way as I can.
Yeah.
And just understanding that in relationships, there's going to be moments where you're like, oh, this is uncomfortable. This is making me a little sad right now. And that's actually okay. And the reality is, I mean, for fuck's sake, this is really the only thing. And like when I look over the vast field of our relationship, like this is the one angry cornstalk sticking up above the others, like, rah. I'm going to be here in your face. And I'm like, yeah, but you're not actually not really much of a problem.
That's the thing. The only thing I get on it, I wish I had more for you, but the only thing I hear is like, if you can hold it like less of a problem and judge it less, that's really the only thing. In other words, like, this is just a thing that a couple is navigating, and you're navigating it with clear communication. I'm also listening for, is there anything he needs to do differently? No. Is he being respectful to her? Yes. Are you being respectful to him? Yes. Do they need to do anything differently? That's got a little something on it. Let's see. Do they need to do anything differently? Okay, you could do something different. Let's see. Okay. Let me just listen for a moment. Yeah, so I think you mentioned a minute ago that he has some inhibitions around, like, in other words, you might say to him, like, go ahead and fuck 90 people. I don't care. I'll be here. And he's got some stuff around it.
Yeah, because the ideal for him is that we are both engaging in these things together. That like if he goes off.
Why is that the ideal?
That's part of it's part of the feeling of what he enjoys is the togetherness with his partner, and right. It's not away from, it's the partner and these other people. That sharing of the energy is part of the core of what he wants.
Okay.
I hope that makes some sense.
Yeah, that makes total sense. It's as you're saying it, they're going, no. And I'm like, all right, you want to elaborate? And they're like, okay, so here's a suggestion, right?
Yeah.
Because here's what the words I'm hearing them say are. They're saying he needs to go explore on his own, fuck some people like crazy, and come home and tell you all about it and involve you in it emotionally. And once he tries that, he's going to like it a fair amount, and it will not be a problem for your relationship.
No, it really wouldn't.
No.
Like I can say that totally honestly.
I mean, I really feel that. I really get it. Also, like, you can encourage him when he goes out to like take you with him in his heart and in his, like, visualize you watching or visualize you there being a part of it. Like this is like an acting exercise for him. He needs to envision you joining him, and he's a creative motherfucker. He can do that.
Yeah.
And then,
that makes a lot of sense actually.
And then tell him to come home and talk to you about it, or like just involve you in an emotional way. And they're like kind of laughing, actually. They're like, he's going to like that a lot more than he thinks he is.
And that might be part of the fear, because, you know, I am Mrs. Haas the fourth. And so a lot of mistakes have been made with Mrs. Haas's the first through third. And I think that some of his issues are residual guilt from that, from maybe not being as transparent and upfront with getting his needs met outside of other relationships.
I see.
And so there's that echo. And I'm like, that's not this though.
That's right.
It's 180 degrees from this.
That's the place you're going to need to do some like loving coaching of him over time, slowly. And you got to do it. You got to massage it, metaphorically speaking, like gently, like he can go one baby step at a time, you know?
Of course.
As long as he's transparent with you and communicates with you about it, he's going to feel good and you're going to feel good.
Yeah.
But he's going to need to take that first leap. And I get that there's a fair amount of fear in his particularly the second chakra. There's a lot of like frozen, stuck energy, fear stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
And so that's just for him to work through.
Yeah.
However he does that, you know, and you know an energy healer who can help him with that, FYI. We can go in there in a session and clear out a bunch of that frozen energy energetically, just on the, you know, if that's a way that he works. I don't know his way of working through stuff, but Another way is to just massage it with you through conversation.
Yeah.
And he takes a little, dips a toe in the water and then comes in back and talks with you about it. Dip a toe in the water, come back and talk about it. And, what I'm getting to is that you're, involved enough in the day-to-day management of his reality that there's no way he's not gonna be like doing shit you don't know about.
No.
So.
No, if he could, I'd be like delighted. Look at what you did. You did a thing. But that is absolutely right. And the reality is, when you're in a quote unquote traditional marriage, there are dozens of ways to fuck up that can be violations of trust, of truth, and everything else. And in our relationship, there's really kind of only one way to fuck up, and that's by being deceitful. It's about what you do, it's not what you can do. Pretty much what you want to do, as long as you're upfront about it. If that makes sense.
That makes sense to me. And I think you're right when you say that he has a bit of a history. He's been shamed. He did some stuff that hurt people. He feels guilty. That's appropriate because in those contracts, he did break the rules or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah.
So he has to learn, this is his little journey.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions?
Now I'm just like, I got to go get my groceries, but
because we're about to wrap up here. So maybe one last one if you've got one.
I do. I am struggling with old childhood. I'm trying to think of the shortest way to say it. So basically, when I was very young, I started performing as an actor when I was about 5 or 6, and did really well for a while. And long story short, all of the funds that I made through the years of my performing were spent in the support of my family. Technically with my consent, but I'm a kid and we're poor, and it's like my residual check came. Oh, of course you can use it for rent. No, don't save it for college or anything. And by the time I actually had to drop out of school because my funds were cut, and I was standing there and I had this sudden realization, wow, if my parents had had their shit together a little bit more, I would have been able to not have this incredible loss in my life, which for me, I decided I'd wanted to be an actor when I was 3. I started working when I was 6. I got into NYU fucking like at the end of my junior year, I guess, or middle of junior year, and so I had all these amazing things lined up, and then it all collapsed and fell apart. And it took me 30 years to get to the point where I felt like I could accept that this wasn't some sort of, horrible part of my life and let it go. And I had this very long conversation with my mom where like there was forgiveness and a lot of tears and all this other shit. And then I thought I had really gotten past it. And I more recently had a conversation with another member of the family, and this topic came up, and her outrage at what had happened, like body slammed me back into this realization that I'm not okay with it, that I'm still angry and disappointed.
Yeah.
And that I can never say that to my mother because it would destroy her, and because I already forgave her. So I'm like, you can't go back and say, actually, I take back my forgiveness. I'm still mad. But that's not what I mean. I don't take back the forgiveness. Forgiveness and still having the pain are two different things.
Yeah.
And it's like an acidic ball of mercury that occasionally gets loose in my brain.
Okay.
And I can't get it back.
Yeah, there's 2 things here that are coming through for you to do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And forgive me for cutting you off. I assume that you're going to say like, well, what do I do with this acidic ball of, is that right?
Yeah. Like what, how do I live with it? Because it's interfering. Yep. It's not just an occasional thought. It's actually interfering with my life.
Number 1 is there's a great exercise where you write a letter that you'll never send.
Yeah.
And they would like you to write a letter you would never send to your parents or your mom, whoever it was that did this, once a week until you have no more letters to write.
Okay.
And these letters should not be nice, and they should not be edited, and they should not be polite. It should be like, fuck you for that. You fucked my life. Fuck you. It should all be there.
Yeah.
Okay. Once a week. I get that it may take like 3 months, because you've got to own how fucking pissed you are and how damaging it was, because it was damaging. That's number one. Number two is, this is the harder one. What strides are you making right now for your acting career?
Well, funnily enough, and strangely enough, and hilariously enough, I'm actually going to be the non-singing lead in an opera in 2 years. So that's a thing.
Okay. Because I get you. That's great. Here's what they're getting at. They're like, you've got to let the vitriol out. It's like you got to squeeze the sides of the boil so the pus can squeeze out. And in the meantime, you've got to stop letting any of it stop you. Nobody's going to build your career for you, as you know. So you've got to go do it despite how much they fucked you. And they did. Now, here's the good news. This is a thing people never expect, but it's true. Particularly kind people like yourself. Okay. When you get more in touch with the rage and the fuck you and the god damn it that's underneath, that's like sort of frozen a little bit right now, it's going to function like an engine, like a jet engine propelling you into action. The fact that the feelings are buried now has you a little bit deadened in your pursuits. You can't like move forward with a lot of energy in your career when you've got the weight of this deadened energy stuck in your body. So by letting the pus out in these letters you're going to write that you'll never send, okay, it's going to ignite. It's going to function like a, when you light the image is like, you know, the spaceship, the rockets, when they shoot off.
The booster.
Yeah, it's the booster. It's the fire under the rocket ship of your career. You have to get mad.
Whew.
So when you have completed all the letters, I get 3 months, once a week for 3 months. Don't skip a week. Okay. When you've completed that, you're going to burn those letters the fuck up in a fire of acknowledgement and honoring and worship of your own anger. It's not a fire that says you were bad, angry feelings. Now get out of here. It's a fire of like, yes, fuckers, you fucked up. Yes, my rage. Yes. And the fire and the fire and the fire. It's like in the way that they would like worship the goddess Kali by dressing up all fucking crazy and putting your nipples out on the street.
Exactly.
Because Kali was like, she's killing ignorance and she's killing illusion. So she's like, deal with me, motherfuckers. When you light up these letters on fire, like I see you doing it on a barbecue thing, you just put some fucking, what's it called? The barbecue gas in there, and then just light that shit up. Let it be an honoring, like a temple, like a sacrificial fire lamb situation where you're sending the flames of your rage to the heavens. The thing that keeps our rage trapped is when the rage is not allowed to be expressed.
Yeah, that is for sure fucking true. Holy shit.
So namaste, you have your assignment. We're very excited to see what happens for you with this ignition. And you're in the perfect time. The time of Corona is the time when this kind of shit can get done, because you kind of can't do a ton of other shit right now. So you can do this shit so that when you're done with this shit, Corona starts to wrap up and you're a rocket ready to go to Mars.
Awesome.
All right. Lena, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and close your records now.
Okay, bye, records.
Thank you to the masters, teachers, and loved ones for their love and compassion. Thank you to the lords of the Akashic Records for their point of view. Thank you to the Holy Spirit of Light for all knowledge and healing. I ask that you return all of Mollena's energy to herself right now. Mollena Lee Williams Haas's energy, all of it back to herself. Please return us all to our complete human wholeness now. The divine portal and the Akashic Records for Mollena Lee Williams Haas are now closed. Amen. The divine portal and the Akashic Records for Mollena Lee Williams Haas are now closed. Amen. The divine portal and the Akashic Records for Mollena Lee Williams Haas are now closed. Amen. 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 So it is. What a treat to have you with us today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you, Cass, for bringing us such a wonderful human being.
Yeah.
Gem you.
Dude, thank you. And thank you for waking me up, because That was a process.
We're going to talk about you after you hang up because I know you got to go get your groceries. And all I'm going to be saying is what a huge fucking fan I am of yours. And I'm going to tell them how to Google you and find your interesting shit on the web and stuff like that.
Yay.
So, yeah.
You are awesome. Thank you.
Thank you
for making that happen.
Absolutely.
So glad it could.
Thank you for being here. Take good
Thank you
care.
for that little taste. And have a wonderful afternoon.
You too.
Thank you, love. You too.
Thank
Get
you.
good groceries.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
There she goes.
Well, that was fun.
Wasn't that fun?
That's fantastic.
I knew once
Thank you
we
so
got
much.
started, it would be like, oh, I'll just let Katie and Mo do their thing.
That was great.
Like two of
She's
my
awesome.
favorite people on the planet just having it out. So like, yeah, I got teared up when you started telling her, like, you tell truth. I just went like, because I knew that.
Oh.
Yeah, that was like, she's amazing.
Yes. She needed to hear that too, I feel like.
Yeah, sometimes I know it's funny because I see her like as a storyteller and as a presenter and all her confidence and all of her out in the world energy of like, fuck yeah, kicking ass, taking names. And I know that she's as like challenged and emotionally fraught and delicate and easily shifted from our center as all the rest of us crazy fuckers.
100%, man. I mean, we all need it. It's sometimes too, I always think like the people who seem the most out there and capable and competent are the ones who need the most support because everyone assumes you're doing okay all the time.
Boom.
Because you've got a strong presentation and nobody's going like, how are you, Mollena? Because she always seems good.
Right. Yeah, I do encourage people to just Google Mollena Lee Williams Haas. And like you can add the words hyena, which is the performance piece. Maybe it was an opera that she and Georg did together. And it's about her like sobriety and this character of a hyena that is part of her sort of spiritual self. And they performed it at like the Dusseldorf Grand Concert Hall. And, you know, like it's just crazy shit. Anyway. Just Google her, you'll find her.
People should Google Mollena Lee Williams Haas, Haas, and the word hyena.
And you can also hear her stories on the Risk podcast. If you want to really do a deep dive, you can hear her stories on The Shout. You can find my old storytelling website. If you like Google Mollena Williams Haas, The Shout, you'll hear the stories.
Theshout.com or
I don't know what it is anymore. I feel like it lost it still has a place, but it's like theshout.weebly.com or something like that.
okay.
Yeah.
But you can search for it.
Yeah, you can search for it. You'll find it.
Awesome.
Yeah. So two storytellers, two comedians. I knew you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's great. She feels like a definite soul sister, like someone who just like is out there being like, here's what's up.
Yeah.
You ready for my world? Oh, you're not? I'm going to talk anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
What a badass.
What a pleasure. And I loved your questions. They were, you were taking angles that I was like, oh, I never thought to question that. So I appreciated that.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Good. All right. Well, my dog desperately needs to pee, and so do I.
Okay, well.
No, I'm done with you people.
Fine. You know what you should do?
Do your work.
Do your work.
Do your fuck you, Desmond. Do your work.
I fucking love you. Do your fucking work.
I fucking love your middle finger as you stick it up. Fuck you. Do your work.
All right, everybody. Fuck you. Do the work. Keep that one in. Bye.
Love you guys.
What are you asking for? All of the answers? Say what? All of the answers? Yeah, all the answers.
Hey guys, thanks for listening. We'd love to hear from you. Please email us with your questions so that we have questions to answer in the Akashic Records. Our email address is allanswerspod@gmail.com. That's allanswerspod@gmail.com. And if you'd like to find us on Facebook or Twitter, it's @allanswerspod, @allanswerspod. Thank you. Oh, whoops. I forgot to stop recording. Hi, Desmond, if you're still listening. Goodbye.
That was a Sounds Awesome production.